What's the one thing those in charge don't want you to be? Educated. There aren't enough racists in the world for the Republican Party to survive. The reason they've made it this far is the massive amounts of misinformation and the defunding and rewriting of our education system. That and billionaire donors. If you ask a group of 10 people what a lot of different political terms mean, you'd probably get a lot of different answers. So I'm here to set the record straight. Hi, I'm Zachary Exum, and welcome to Left Behind. I've got a political compass here behind me because I think left and right are great places to start, since you can't seem to have a political discussion without those vague terms nowadays. The left or right spectrum can either refer to economic structure or social values. I think the only reliable version is the economic one, since social values and morals are all over the place, very fluid and situational. Politically, I think the economic one is the only one that should be used on a compass like this. The division between the two sides of the x-axis is easier than a lot of people make it out to be. The right side is capitalism. Oh my. And the left side is socialism. Or at least it's easy to say that. Those terms get misused and abused in the American political sphere. So let me give you the basic, real definitions. Forget everything you've heard about either word and listen. Capitalism is an economic system in which the means of production and distribution are privately or corporately owned, and development occurs through the accumulation and reinvestment of profits gained in a free market. That's a loaded sentence, so let me break it down. The means of production and distribution are the ways in which goods and services are made and distributed. A free market allows price fluctuation to determine supply, demand, and prices, and under capitalism, it's profit that drives production and distribution. Look, I'll draw a little pyramid for capitalism. Socialism is any of various theories or systems of social organization in which the means of producing and distributing goods is owned collectively, or by a centralized government that often plans and controls the economy. There are various different types of socialism, which are more distinctly different than the different types of capitalist systems. And one of the biggest distinctions is whether the government controls the economy or the people do. Goods and services are produced and distributed based on the needs of the collective, not any profit motive. There's a circle for collectivism. The means of production aren't just resources, it's mostly labor, and that's the main difference between capitalism and socialism. Are you going to work to make profit for a company, or are you going to work to benefit the collective? And I'm saying collective, not just society, because people on the right would argue that working for profit does benefit society. I think the opposite, and I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible in these definitions. Now, if you're way over here, you believe that the economy should be completely controlled, whereas if you're over here, you think there should be no regulations on the market at all, including restrictions like slavery. The middle ground fights about how much regulation there should be. The y-axis is a bit more confusing to people, I think, for a variety of reasons. At the top, you've got authoritarianism, which is when the government is in control or has power. Socialism is not when the government does stuff. Socialism only refers to the economy. Authoritarianism is when the government has the power to control how society functions. Libertarianism, down at the bottom, is when the government does not have power. And at the very bottom is anarchy, no government. The Libertarian Party in the United States is a libertarian right party, not just libertarianism as a whole. that can be confusing. I dropped a big word a second ago, anarchy. Anarchy is not what you see in the movies, like The Purge. Funnily enough, The Purge is actually authoritarian as fuck. Anarchy is a lack of a government, which is how humans lived for thousands of years. It doesn't mean there's no rules or consequences. Are there not consequences or unwritten rules for if you break in line or punch someone in public? The second one also has laws assigned to it, of course, but if it didn't, you'd probably still get punished for it. An anarchist society can be structured in different ways, just like a society with a government. So you got all this down here. Whether that be through collective consensus or market fluctuations. Another word thrown around a lot, but not really understood, is fascism. Fascism is a system of government marked by centralization of authority under a dictator. A capitalist economy subject to stringent governmental controls, violent suppression of the opposition, and typically a policy of belligerent nationalism and racism. It's not just authoritarian right, it's far right. Many right-wing political personalities will use horseshoe theory to say that being far left is just as bad as being far right and that the left are the real fascists. This simply isn't true. Yes, leftist governments can be just as awful as far-right ones, although they aren't inherently. But structurally, they are different. Fascism is far-right authoritarian, and no matter how bad other government or economic structures are, they aren't fascist. Recently, Marxism-Leninism has been thrown around a lot too by the right, or at least Marxism, which I think is a ridiculous thing to discuss in reference to the American electorate, which probably has less than 0.01% Marxists in it. Marxism is specifically the economic theories of Karl Marx, and Marxism-Leninism is the theories by Vladimir Lenin, who formed the Soviet Union, and that the Vietnamese government currently uses a version of today. It's a type of authoritarian communist government, which honestly isn't that bad in Vietnam, and wasn't that bad in the USSR until Stalin abused his power. Personally, that's my issue with authoritarianism, even on the left, is the potential for corruption. Okay, so what is communism? Is it just extreme socialism? Communism is a theoretical economic system characterized by the collective ownership of property and by the organization of labor for the common advantage of all members. So, sort of. It's socialism that specifically is focused on helping the collective, and all means of production are collectively owned. Therefore, it would be far left specifically. But it too has a lot of different ways to be structured. While we're talking about communism, I'll explain some theory terms, which I think are important. What is the proletariat, and what is the bourgeoisie? The proletariat are the wage earners, who, possessing neither capital nor production means, must earn their living by selling their labor. Who does that include? The lower class as a whole, and anyone who works to earn wages and or doesn't own any means of production. I'll stretch this as far as it'll go to make sure we're clear. The lower class and much of the middle class is proletariat. The managerial class is proletariat too, even though they're class traders by trade, meaning they actively work to benefit the bourgeoisie, not their fellow workers. Even very wealthy people, like professional athletes or entertainers, can be part of the proletariat if they don't own capital or any means of productions. So if they don't own stocks or land or their own business. The opposite to the proletariat, and economically the direct opposition of it, is the bourgeoisie, which are those who own capital and or the means of production. Once again, anyone who owns a business, stocks, or land. Okay, so the Democrats are on the left and the Republicans are on the right. Right? Not exactly. The Democratic Party is to the left of the Republican Party, but both of them have authoritarian right policies. Kind of like that. Within the Democratic Party, there is a sect called the Democratic Socialists, who are more like true centrists, despite being some of the farthest left politicians in the American government, like Bernie Sanders, he'd be like here, centrism. What the two parties do represent, though, are liberalism and conservatism. Liberals believe that capitalism should be regulated in a way that doesn't disadvantage or exclude minorities, at least not as much as conservatives do. Conservatives value traditionalist values, which are almost exclusively racist, sexist, and classist in nature. Liberals and conservatives basically believe the same thing. The difference being, liberals want minorities to have more rights. There's hundreds of more terms, but I'm just going to cover a few more to keep this from dragging on any longer than it already has. Since we're living through the second Gilded Age, important words to know are monopoly and oligopoly. A monopoly is a company that owns the means of production of all of one type of good or service. A great example of this is the Rockefellers in the early 1800s, how they controlled oil. That was during the first Gilded Age. After that got way out of hand, we passed laws to prevent monopolies. But now, we've got potentially a worse problem: oligopolies. Like how an oligarchy is a government run by a few people, an oligopoly is when a few different companies control the whole market. The reason this might be worse than a monopoly is that it allows for fake competition. These companies pretend to compete with each other, to trick the consumer and manipulate the market. But in reality, they've made complex deals with each other to be able to stay in power and collect as much money as possible. About 11 companies control the entire US market: Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Kellogg's, General Mills, Kraft Heinz, Mondelez International, Mars, Unilever, PepsiCo, Nestle, and Johnson & Johnson. There's more in other sectors, but it's grim how much power these corporations have over our lives. A word used a lot in the online political sphere is grift, grifter, or grifting. Grifting is playing up an idea, trying to defend an idea, or putting out propaganda about an idea with the intention to make money off of it. Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro are good examples of grifters, because while they probably believe a lot of what they say, they hyperbolize it and purposefully lie in order to rile people up so they'll donate to them, or at least keep watching. Finally, I'd like to clarify what propaganda is. This video is propaganda, and nearly any media you consume is. Propaganda is communication that is primarily used to influence an audience and further an agenda. So propaganda is not inherently bad. It's just anything that is designed to influence an audience. It's very hard to design something that isn't supposed to influence someone. Commercials are propaganda, anything with emotions is propaganda, and basically all news is as well. A specific type of propaganda I'd like to point out is Agitprop, which is propaganda specifically designed to agitate people and incite anger. This is one of the most effective forms of propaganda. Okay, been going on long enough. That concludes that. Let me know if there's any topics you'd like me to cover on this show. Like, subscribe, have a great day.